We use it to draw some lines and shapes and some basic color. So I'm going to start up Adobe Illustrator. You will find the program. You should find the program in the dock. So just clicking on it will open Adobe Illustrator. And when you first open it, you have a window that looks similar to this. We want to make a new blank document. So we're going to click on New File. And we want a standard size letter print document. So if you know it by memory, you can enter the values over here, 11 by 8.5 or 8.5 by 11 inches, or you can go to the print because this selects what kind of document you want to have. There's some customized ones, or you can make your own, but we can just choose letter size and it will be the same thing, and it's just going to show it as points. I am going to choose a landscape view, so that's 11 by 8.5 because I want to have a wider document than a taller document, but that'll be your choice. And then I'm going to create, and this is my blank document, so I can begin working. Now, to draw some basic shapes, let's just first become familiar with some of the tools that we need to use. The very first and most important tool that you're going to be using most of the time is this black arrow here, not to be confused with the one next to it. The black arrow is known as the selection tool. And what does the selection let you do? Well, in this program, everything you draw is a different object. It's a different object. That's the best way I can say it. So if you want to do anything, you always have to select it in order to change it, change its color, make it larger, etc., etc. So you always come back to this selection tool. Okay. Now, we skip some of these tools and we'll talk about them later, but we're going to focus on the line segment tools and the shape tools. And maybe we'll touch on the brush if there's time. So first let me click on the line tool. See what the sample there shows you is you can make just basic lines from one point to the other. So if I click on that, I am now ready to draw a line. All I need to do is click and hold down the button of the mouse or the trackpad and drag across, and it will draw a line in the direction that I drag. So if I want a line that goes down, I click and I go down. If I want to go diagonal, I go in a diagonal mode. Now, going back to what I said, what do I want to do with these lines? I can do different things with those lines. So I go back to the selection tool. And now whenever I click on one of the lines, notice how it gets selected and it becomes blue. So there's a highlighted blue color on it. That tells you that's the line that I'm currently working on. I can move it. I can resize it. I can change its shape. And now there's other things I can do with the line. So I can go over to the properties panel. You want to find the properties on the right side. It should always be there. If it's hidden, look for this little control panel icon, click on that, and it should open up the properties. Sometimes you just can't find it, and you might find it by going to the window menu and look for properties. That will be the easiest way to find the properties. What kinds of properties can we do with this object? Well, for now, let's focus on appearance. Appearance is the way that the line looks. And there are three basic settings, and there's some other things that we could do later. But there's some three basic settings that we can do to the line. The first is, what I'm going to talk about is the stroke. A stroke is actually another word for line. So moving over here to the right side, 1 point is equal to the size of the line. And if I make this number go up, the line changes in thickness. So the stroke size is what you would change if you want your line to be thicker or thinner. And you can actually go to a very, very thin, like a quarter of a point, and it'll be like hairline thin, very, very thin. And then you can make it bigger again. So if I want a line to have a 20 point, I click it first, then I go over here and I make this and enter the number 20 and see how thick it is. So you can have a variety of different thicknesses of lines for various reasons. Then the next thing that I want to show you is how do you change the color of the line? And that will be done by clicking on this little guy. If you notice, it looks like a little frame. It looks like a little box. So clicking on that after you select a line segment brings up a little swatch toolbar. Then you can click any of these swatch colors and you notice that the lines change color. So it's very simple. So if I want this line to change color, first I select it, then I go to the properties, and I click on this little box, and then choose a color. These are pre-made colors, and we'll be learning a little more about color later, but if you want to make your own specific color, something a little brighter, or just a shade that's not here, you can click on this mixer here, and this would actually let you choose from the color spectrum yourself. You can kind of choose just the right shade, or mix in the colors yourself, like add more blue, add more magenta, add more black to make it darker, etc., etc. So if I want it darker, I add more black, and notice it gets darker, and that's how you change the color. Finally, if you notice when I draw these lines, the lines overlap. Anything that I draw, the thing that I draw second goes on top of the other thing. If you want something to be transparent, then you have opacity. Opacity is a setting that you'll find that will be very neat. If you lower the opacity on any object, it makes it transparent or semi-transparent, depending on how much opacity you give it. So if you make it 0%, then it becomes invisible. If you make it 50%, then you can see through it about 50%. And that's basic. Those are the basics of lines. Okay? Now, let's move on to shapes. I'm going to select these lines, and I can just erase them by deleting. On the keyboard, just click the delete or backspace key, and it will delete the line. That's a quick way to delete things. I am going to go to the shape tools. Let's take a look at the shape tools. What do the shape tools do? Well, they let you draw basic shapes. Right now, I have the rectangle selected. But I want you to notice that if I click and hold down the button of the rectangle tool, I have other shapes that I can select. So hold down the button and then choose a different tool. Let's just draw every single one of these one at a time. So rectangle first, and you just click and drag, and it'll draw a shape. Very basic. Let's draw a rounded rectangle. It's basically the same thing. Then let's draw a circle. Whoops, make sure you click it first, and then sometimes if you just click, it draws the shape. Just so you know, if you select the shape and click instead of dragging, it brings up a little window and it lets you enter the width and the height of the shape, and then it draws it for you. So that's that way I'm not confusing you. So that's a circle, but I can also draw my own circles, just so you know. It could be ovals, shapes, it can have different shapes. Now I'm going to draw a polygon, and polygons are many-sided shapes, so you can have many sides, not just rectangles. And I'll talk about a little more in that in a minute. And finally, let's draw a star. And here's a basic star. Okay? So now, the way that you can then change the look of the shapes is by selecting them first. Use the select tool and go over to the properties in the same way. But notice that now we can actually use the fill. The fill doesn't work with lines, but it works with shapes. So if I select the shape and I go to fill, I can give it a color. So I can select these shapes one at a time and give them all different colors. Like a circle, and then go to fill and give it a color. So each of these, you just click on the shape, select it, and then choose fill. By the way, one thing to keep in mind, if I click inside the shape, nothing happens. That's because right now the shape is transparent. There is no color. So it's not actually clicking anything. You have to click on the line first. And then once you give it a color, then that shape can be clicked on the inside and you can move it on the inside. And you can also change the color of the line. So like we learned before, if you go to the stroke size, you can change the thickness of the line, and you can change the color of the line of the shape as well. So the lines themselves of the shapes can have different colors too. And these are some of the basics of shapes. Now, just a couple more things before I end the video. When you're drawing any shape, if you click on it and you see these little circles in the corners, these allow you to round out the corners. So any shape that has these corners actually would allow you then to make the corners round. So here's that little circle here on the corner, and it lets you round out the corners. Sometimes you might want to have softer edges on some of the shapes. And the way that we do it with the star is actually a little different. We don't use the black arrow, we use the white arrow. And you'll see those little circles appear, and this will let you round out those corners too. But for the most part, everything's done with the regular select tool. Okay, one more thing. The polygon tool, you can just simply click and enter the size of the polygon you want. So if you enter number 3, that will give you 3 sides. That gives you a triangle. If you enter 5, for example, that gives you a pentagon. And so on and so on. And there's a shortcut. If you're drawing a shape and then you use the arrows on your keyboard, so while you're drawing the shape without letting go of the mouse, you can go up and down, and it'll change the number of sides before you let go of the mouse. And that could be your final shape. So anytime you just draw a shape and you use up and down, it'll change the number of sides. The same thing applies for your star. If you click and drag, you can add more points to your star or less points before you let go of the mouse, and you'll have different types of stars. So those are some just very basic introductions to drawing shapes and lines, and I hope this helps you just get started. See you on the next video.